Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at MISTRA's 10th annual PGM Roundtable. My name is Zamanzima Mazibuga Makena. I am the senior researcher in the Knowledge Economy and Scientific Advancement faculty at MISTRA. So during the webinar, we encourage you to please post your questions, your comments using the Zoom Q&A function throughout the webinar. And we'll have someone who will be moderating the questions to ensure that these are included in the discussion. We'll also be live posting throughout the event on MISTRA's social media platforms. You'll find us on LinkedIn with the username Mapungube Institute for Strategic Reflection, on Facebook, Mapungube Institute for Strategic Reflection, as well as on X. And our handle is at @MISTRA_SA. We also will be using these following hashtags, hashtag PGM Roundtable, hashtag MISTRA. So please do engage with us by tagging us and using these hashtags. I will just start immediately by introducing Mr. Joel Nechitenze, who is the Executive Director at MISTRA, to welcome us. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Zama, and welcome to all the colleagues who have joined us at this 2025 MISTRA Annual PGM Roundtable. As intimated last year, we can now celebrate our La Decima, the 10th PGM Roundtable. As we all know, there are all manner of global dynamics, including attempts at undermining the low-carbon transition. But we can say with confidence that green technology is irreversible. A brief examination of developments since our last roundtable does underline the central role of platinum group metals in this transition and in other modern technologies. The rise of artificial intelligence, for example, and its data centers is creating energy demand at a scale rarely seen in history. It is estimated that such demand will double by 2030. That is by a magnitude which is equal to today's total Japanese electricity consumption. And many data centers are introducing hydrogen fuel cells as their source of energy. The same artificial intelligence requires data storage density with which current technologies cannot cope. In this regard, the unique properties of ruthenium, which is part of the PGM family, has come into play in hard disk drivers. Even in battery technologies, which some have characterized as a threat to the hydrogen economy, it has been established that batteries can, in fact, be manufactured using palladium, another PGM, with higher energy density, slower discharge, and better cyclability. In other words, platinum group metals are proving themselves as modernity's gift that keeps on giving. Lest we need reminding, South Africa has got more than 80% of the world's reserves of these metals. And so as we agonize over the many challenges that we face as a country, we need to remember our natural blessings. The question is how we use these endowments for the benefit of society. Over the past year, we have seen a few industries scaling up to large electrolysis systems which produce hundreds of megawatts. Airbus has announced that it will be ground testing a commercially viable hydrogen airliner by 2027. In addition to China, which intends to develop a 1.3 billion US dollars hydrogen industry, Japan, South Korea, Europe, Australia, and North America are moving with speed. New entrants such as Turkey, India, Singapore, and others are entering the terrain at scale. In Africa, South Africa, Namibia, Egypt, Kenya, and Morocco, among others, are also ratcheting up their activities. But as we all know, there have been concerns expressed about the slowdown in implementation. The chief executive of a Portuguese power company, EDP, says that green hydrogen was an inflated expectation that has turned into a valley of disillusionment. This is because of projects that are being cancelled and investments being trimmed down. The reasons that are cited for this are the cost of electricity and of the electrolyzers, as well as hydrogen storage, temperature, and leaks. In my view, these are normal challenges to be expected in any nascent industry, and many of them are being successfully resolved. For instance, in the past 7 years, fuel cell costs have declined by 80%, and green hydrogen production, or rather, green hydrogen production is currently less than 1% of demand. So the demand is much, much higher. South Africa can pride itself as one of the countries making progress in the hydrogen economy. And since our last roundtable, there are many developments which include, for instance, Bambili and other companies are now producing catalysts for the global market. Blended finance has been secured for the Green Hydrogen Fund with joint participation by the PIC, IDC, and DBSA, and support from the European Union. The Kucha Green Ammonia plant is expected to achieve commercial production by 2029, and it has guaranteed off-takers in Europe and Japan. Skills development from level 4 qualifications to doctorates has been put high on the agenda. Eskom's Renewable Energy Business Unit has initiated a process to set up green hydrogen pilot facility. In other words, our country is becoming a critical contributor to the global hydrogen economy across the whole value chain, with platinum group metals at the core. The discussion today is meant to help us assess the progress that we're making and self-critically to examine whether there are areas where we can do better. One such area is the issue of financial beneficiation, which we need to interrogate with frankness and strategic foresight, because it does not make sense that with 80% of the world's reserves of platinum group metals, we should be promoting PGM exchanges in other parts of the world while resisting the establishment of one in our country. The Mapungubwe Institute is proud that during the course of 2024 and 2025, we completed research on South Africa's critical mineral strategy in partnership with Mintech and the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, a strategy that has now been approved by Cabinet. One of the estimates in the strategy is that Africa could create 2.3 million jobs and increase its GDP by 12% through local processing and beneficiation of critical minerals. In relation to South Africa in particular, the mining industry has got the potential to become a firm platform for a new industrialization drive. So we just need to seize the opportunity. Thank you very much, and you are all welcome.
Thank you very much, Edie, for that warm welcome and those insights. I'll now introduce Luanda, who will moderate the next session and will be the one who introduces our panel of speakers. Luanda, please take ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luanda Makolane. I'm also a researcher at the CASA faculty, Knowledge Economy and Scientific Advancement. I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers. And our first speaker is Ms. Mandy Mlilo. She is the acting chief director for hydrogen and energy at the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. She was appointed in September 2025 to guide the rollout of the National Hydrogen Initiative through the Interim Hydrogen Coordination Office. And she today will be helping us unpack the South African Hydrogen Society Roadmap. Ms. Mandy Mlilo, over to you. Thank you. Hi, Mandy. Okay, colleagues,
Good
Mandy.
morning, Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Sorry about that. There seemed to be a bit of a challenge because I got kicked out, and I'm not sure what could be the problem, but I'm hoping that it won't persist. So let me just quickly project.
Thank you.
Just confirm if you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we are.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I just want to take this opportunity on behalf of the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation to just extend our sincere gratitude for allowing us to come and present and just give you an update of the Cabinet-approved Hydrogen Society Roadmap, which was approved by Cabinet in September of 2021. So
Hello, Mandy, we can't hear you. Hi, Mandy. You've lost sound. We can't hear you on our side. Okay. Colleagues, I think Miss Mandy is experiencing some technical difficulties, and I think it's best for us to move on to the next speaker whilst we try to sort out those challenges. And Vyashka, can we please move on to you, and then we'll come back to Mandy. Vyashka Mobia is a technical advisor on green hydrogen at GIZ, supporting the environmental sustainability on green hydrogen South Africa. She also serves as a co-lead for Women in Green Hydrogen Africa, advancing gender inclusion across the sector. She will be helping us unpack green hydrogen as a strategic asset for sustainable economic transformation. Vyashka? Thank you.
Thanks, Luanda. Just confirm if you can see my screen properly. Luanda, could you hear me?
Yes, we can see your screen, but I think we're going to see some of your notes as well.
Okay, it's fine. I took out my notes. I don't think that setting worked on mine, so I'm just going to continue if that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
All right, perfect. Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Vyaksha Mohabir from GIZ. GIZ is the German Development Corporation. I work as a technical advisor under the Green Hydrogen South Africa portfolio, specifically under a program called H2SA. And our implementation partner is the Department of Electricity and Energy. I'm going to take you through a quick presentation on one of the studies that we've conducted last year, focusing on critical raw materials for the green hydrogen economy in South Africa. This falls under the H2SA program, like I said, which is made up of 4 components, focusing on policy and regulation, capacity building and training, private sector and finance, and component 4, which is just transition and sustainability. So the study was undertaken within the component 4 of the H2SA program. So for GIZ South Africa, this was really a high level study that we did, pretty much one of our first critical raw material topics within the green hydrogen space that we have conducted so far. And really what we aim to do was to take a step back and just look at what the mining of these materials entail in South Africa, what are the sort of social, economic, and environmental impacts that comes with this, what would be the potential demand. We looked at different demand, or we looked at a demand scenario. We also looked at some sustainable mining practices, as well as, just how we can diversify the value chain. So, like I said, for GIZ, this is really the first critical raw materials topic. So we really did, just look at it from a holistic perspective and set the tone for future projects that we have in the pipeline under the critical raw materials and the green hydrogen banner within the program. This is the link to the study. I what I intended to do was to give you as much as I can from the study. I did not want to, with the time limitation, I did not want to take into too much of detail. You're most welcome to ask questions or to get in touch with me privately as well to set up a session if you have any more questions or anything you want to find out about the study. But this is the link to the study that I'm going to take you through. The study is made up of 13 chapters. So what I've done here is really given a sort of a snapshot of almost each chapter or the key chapters in the study, and not necessarily every in too much of detail. But yeah, the study contains 13 chapters. It was conducted last year, from February last year till February this year. We officially launched the study in March 2025. So earlier this year, we did the study in partnership with a service provider called DMT Kai Butler, who supported us with the implementation of the study. So just some quick background on this. I think we all know the world is shifting towards, net zero economies, and green hydrogen plays a critical role in this drive towards net zero emissions, for example, and the just energy transition, and as part of the green hydrogen, critical raw materials play a strategic role, and South Africa has a strategic position in this case. Firstly, we're rich in the critical raw materials, specifically in your platinum group metals, as mentioned earlier, that we have 80% of the world's PGMs, and PGMs are used for electrolyzers and fuel cells in the green hydrogen space. And one of the other strategic positions we have is that we poised for industrial diversification. So there's a need for us to start manufacturing, beneficiation, and exporting some of these goods. So really adding local value addition to these critical raw materials in the country. And I think what's important to note that there is, some key policies that are in place now, not just, from South Africa's side, we have the critical minerals strategy that was recently launched and released and approved by Parliament, but we also have the Africa Union critical minerals strategy as well. And then we have the European Union, for example. And where these all fit in is the European Union one aims to diversify their supply chain by moving away from countries like China and not experiencing challenges like we've had, for example, in the COVID period. So really the EU, for example, is one of the key regions that's creating the demand for these technologies and for these critical raw materials, and then our policies rather speak to the supply. But I think the aim for us is really to move away from just exporting raw materials and really export something as a value addition to the world. So why this study? The study really examines, the socioeconomic and the environmental implications with this, because as the demand increases, it puts more pressure on the environment, but there's also social and economic benefits and drawbacks to this. And it also highlights, how strategic resource management can drive sustainable economic transformation, beneficiation, and then also inclusive development. So I think the important point to note is that green hydrogen is more than just an energy sector. It's really a strategic asset because it doesn't just provide energy and there's also this economic growth that comes with this. There's also the need for regional integration and also socially uplifting sort of socially uplifting and creating jobs and a whole new industry in South Africa. Just a quick research objectives. We, like I said, analyzed the impacts of mining critical raw materials. We also did some spatial mapping using GIS systems to really understand where are the critical minerals based. In this case, the critical minerals are PGMs, which was the minerals we largely focused on in the study, but we also took into consideration cobalt, nickel, rare earth elements, and a few other critical raw materials as well. So we use GIS mapping to understand where these maps are in relation to some of the key infrastructure that exists in South Africa. And I take you into more detail as we go into the presentation. We looked at the sustainability of the mining operations. These are the key critical minerals we looked at in the study. We evaluated the environmental and socioeconomic impacts. We modeled future critical raw material demand. We looked into technologies as well as AI at this point. And then we also had validation workshops that took place as the study was being conducted. We would develop a few chapters and then bringing key stakeholders into the room for validation workshops to really understand, are we heading in the right path, where the gaps are, and what needs to be filled. Chapter 3 just speaks to the quick, the scope and the limitations. It's really a desktop level study, high level. One of the major challenges we did have at that point was bringing the mining industry companies into the room. So we had government, academia, civil society, but we struggled to get the mining companies into the room to really get their perspective. So that does remain a bit of a limitation onto the study. So I'll go straight into the content of this. For chapter 5 of the study looks at the different maps that we've created through GIS. So these are static maps. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse here. or if I can access the laser. Yeah. The first base map we had was really to identify where the mines are, and the mines and facilities are in the country. And I think we all know, your PGMs are largely in your northwest region. We also have some rare earth elements around the Western Cape. We have manganese in the Northern Cape. So that was basically the main base map that we use. Then we also looked at the hydrology. So which are the key river systems that are running along these mining regions, specifically your Limpopo, Olifants, Vaal, Crocodile River are key river systems that run close to the mining areas. Then we also looked at renewable energy. So this was renewable energy that already exists and renewable energy that projects that could come into play in the future, or planned projects. And if you note, specifically for your PGM mining, there's not a lot of renewable energy access to those mines, purely because we have a lot of wind energy, which is mostly along the coastlines. And then we have maybe some of your solar plants would be a little closer than your wind systems, because most of the solar plants are also then now located in the Northern Cape region, but this is beneficial for the manganese mining. We also then looked at your power lines. So where the power lines in South Africa in relation to the mining activities, and we found that a lot of the power lines run towards provinces or to areas where it's highly populated or densely populated. In this case, you can see the Gauteng region has most of the power lines, but I think it's quite a advanced infrastructure in South Africa compared to the rest of Africa. But to use renewable energy to feed into these mining activities, there is still the transmission grid challenge that we face in the energy sector. We also looked at what are the road networks that lead to some of these mines. We found that there's different corridors linking to different ports, also to the Mozambique ports as well. Again, the road networks in South Africa is quite highly established. Then we looked at the railway networks, and this still remains a major challenge, because historically South Africa built most of the railway networks around the platinum, the gold and the coal mining in that time. So, probably at that time, these type of minerals or materials were not as critical as they are now. So there's still a major gap in our railway networks. Then we looked at the conservation areas. So, the different game reserves, for example, Kruger National Park overlaps some of the activities that we found. And then we also looked at protected areas. In this case, protected areas are, for example, your heritage sites. We have the Cradle of Humankind close to the northwest, again, overlapping some of these activities. And with that, we came to find that there was some of the environmental impacts that were quite prominent. One being, the mines, like I said, overlap with key biomes and conservation areas. So like your grasslands, which is already a critically endangered area. Then we have your mining impacts on the hydrology. So your river systems via water contamination, depletion, acid mine drainage. Then we also looked at we also found that there's pollution, general pollution from the hazardous chemicals into the soil, water, and air contamination. And then we also had the infrastructure impacts as well. I think as the demand again increases, this poses another threat to the environment as well, because demand increases, more infrastructure, increase in the effect on the environment. But I think this is something we're all quite aware of, but it was just a nice way to sort of consolidate and put into the study as well. This is quite an interesting chapter that we did. So in chapter six, we looked at or we modeled a demand scenario using the net zero emission policies that exist around the world, or the net zero emission targets around the world. And how we did this was we used the data from the International Energy Agency. I'm going to give you a very high level overview of what the results are and what we did. The chapter gives you more details on what this is about. But So yeah, we developed this techno-economic model, and we looked at stated policies, meaning what are the policies that currently exist now, which is now sort of your short-term net zero targets. Then we looked at your announced pledges, which falls under your medium-term net zero targets, and then your long term was your net zero emissions by 50. So this was the base data that we did use to create a demand scenario. And I'll give you, and we did this for all of the critical raw materials mentioned in the study to see what would be the potential demand over this period of time. And I'll take you into more details in the next slide, but this table really just gives a highlight of South Africa's critical raw materials that are expected to contribute towards, or how much of them are expected to contribute towards the green hydrogen transition. And you can see in this case, platinum has at least 90%. You have your titanium as well, manganese, cobalt. So we have a lot of critical raw materials that are feeding into the green hydrogen or the clean energy transition at this point, and not just platinum. So this is an example
Sorry,
of the.
Vyashka.
Yes.
You have 5 minutes left, please.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
This is an example of the demand scenario that we looked at, and what we found in all the scenarios was the general trend of the demand based on the short-term, medium-term, and long-term policies that I mentioned earlier. And what we've seen is that at this point, there's this, or currently the phase we're in, there's a strong increase in demand, and then there's a plateau, and then as we go towards your 2050, closer to when we need to meet net emission or net zero emission targets, there's this decline. And this slide really explains why. One, there's an assumption that we currently, well, it's not an assumption, right now we are in the just energy transition. And so there's this sharp increase in the critical raw material demand over the next 10 to 15 years because, there's a need for new mining and process activities that need to take place in order to develop these technologies for the just energy transition. But maybe after 2035 to 2050, you find that there's a decline and a plateau with the assumption that better technologies come on board. And then also we could have recycling of some of these technologies to get these critical raw materials again. And then again, why we say plateau and not just a decline, because in some cases, critical raw materials cannot be easily replaced in future technologies. So the demand plateaus, it doesn't drop. So this really explains, one, better technologies, two, recycling, that speaks to the decline in 2035 to 2050. And then before 2050, you'll see in the graph that I had before this, there's a small bump in the critical raw material demand that is expected just before 2050. And this is likely due to the final push in mining and production to meet last-minute targets for net zero emissions. So that's really just a high-level overview of the modeling. It's given in much more detail in the study. We also looked at the impacts, and I think I mentioned this, as the demand increases, we're going to have, more impacts on the greenhouse gas emissions, water use, energy demand, and land disruption. But with recycling and sustainable planning, we can, in the long term, then reduce these impacts. We looked at the socioeconomic impacts, the benefits, and the drawbacks. And again, infrastructure and economic growth is one of them. So within the areas where these mining activities take place, they do create infrastructure or promote infrastructure and economic growth. We also have economic inclusion and empowerment, the mining charter mandating 30% of BEE shareholding of new mines, empowering historically disadvantaged individuals. It promotes local content and supplier development. And then there's the social investment. So companies often or are said to invest in education, health, and safety within these communities. Then there's drawbacks. We looked at the health and safety risks, again, environmental health risks that it has on the communities. Market volatility, PGMs don't stay the same price, also then leads to job losses. And then mine closures, these mines don't last forever. The resources do get depleted at some point, so there's a need for us to promote long-term, post-mining activities for especially smaller towns. And we also had a chapter on gendered impacts, but I didn't put that into too much detail here. Then we looked at the security and resilience of these critical raw materials, and we looked at the risks and ways that we can strengthen the supply chains. Some of the risks is our ports are inefficient at this point due to aging infrastructure. We all know the energy insecurity challenges we face in South Africa. And as much as South Africa has PGMs, there's still a gap in the lack of new exploration to meet the demands. And linked to this is then the financing mechanism, or the need for more and more financing mechanisms to be put in place to to improve investment in new exploration. One of the other risks was the mention of the unstable or irregulatory inconsistencies, and then the global market volatility. So again, price fluctuations. So what needs to be done to strengthen resilience is local beneficiation. Like I said, adding value to these critical raw materials, electrolyzer recycling. What's important to know about the recycling part is that as much as we can recycling electrolyzers cannot meet the full demand. And at this point, we do not have the amount of or electrolyzers or enough electrolyzers to make recycling profitable yet. The technologies are still being developed. There's a need to support junior explorers and then also promote regional value chain through the Africa Free Trade Agreement. I think I spoke a lot about this, so I'm just going to skip this part. This is one of the last
Thank you so much, Fiashka. Unfortunately, we're also dealing with a very tight schedule.
No problem.
I think some of these issues can be picked up during the question and answer, where you can actually expand on some of the points that you'd like to lament now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Is Mandy, are you able to join us now?
Yes, I'm able to join. I'm using my phone, but so can I get someone to assist with the projection of the presentation, please?
Yes. Funi,
That
can you
would be
please project for us? As previously noted, Mandy is the acting chief director at DSI, and she's heading up the program for green hydrogen. Over to you, Mandy.
Okay. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much to Mistra for extending this wonderful opportunity for the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation to come and present on the update of the Cabinet-approved Hydrogen Society roadmap. So my presentation, I will try and be as quick as I can, just to give you a sense of the kind of work that the department is currently doing, the initiatives that you are driving or that you are involved in actively, that we believe will ultimately contribute to some sort of really driving towards the successful achievement or attainment of the Hydrogen Society roadmap. So my presentation will just give you the kind of coordination and governance structures that we have put in place that we are supporting as the department, what the policy directives or policies that we are influencing, that we have been providing inputs into, that we believe somehow are complementary to the achievement of the vision of the Hydrogen Society roadmap, as well as we give you just in terms of what we have done in terms of driving the science diplomacy that is also geared towards contributing to that vision. And then we'll end with just highlighting the key messages that we want the key partners just to take note of. And next slide, please. Well, just to give you a sense in terms of what drives our mandate as the department, well, we derive our mandate from the 2019 White Paper on Science, Technology and Innovation, which is anchored on core themes of transformation, partnership and inclusivity. And part of our work, the hydrogen and energy related work that we support, it also contributes to the energy innovation of the decadal plan, 10-year decadal plan, which is an implementation plan of the White Paper on Science, Technology and Innovation. And the slide that you are seeing, it gives you the sense of the kind of work that informs, or the kind of partnerships that informs what we do. And these are the policy intents that we're trying to drive through the work that we are the hydrogen and energy related work that we are supporting as the department. But at the core, also we have adopted, we have just since adopted the DSTI mantra, which says placing science, technology, innovation at the center of government, education, society, and economy. And with that said, we're just saying we are trying to build capabilities within the ecosystem that will ensure that we solve societal challenges and economic problems in real time using science, technology, and innovation, becoming impactful, becoming relevant in addressing those challenges. Next slide, please. Well, I think that the colleague prior, even Dr. Natasha, has already spoken to in terms of the competitive advantage that we have in South Africa. And I think one of the things that we're highlighting from the department is that our work really it seeks to leverage on the opportunities that are there, especially the mineral endowment opportunities that we have. For example, the platinum group metals. So when we embarked on this hydrogen economy agenda of South Africa, we were of the view that as much as we want to address energy security, energy access, and reduction of greenhouse gases, but at the same time, at the core, we also want to advance the opportunities that lie with mineral beneficiation of platinum group metals, which we believe we have most of the abundant mineral reserves within South Africa, which constitute mostly approximately about 75% of global reserves. So we believe that through the Hydrogen South Africa program, we have managed to really, to a certain degree, to a significant degree, to really maximize on that opportunity. And I want to mention, I think I'm always proud to say that government really saw the opportunities when it comes to hydrogen economy when the hydrogen economy agenda was not in fashion. Government started investing in the hydrogen economy of South Africa in 2007 when it approved the National Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Research, Development and Innovation Strategy, which we rebranded it as Hydrogen South Africa HySA program. So today we're able to, based on that investment, we're able to say we're at an opportune level or a time where we can really maximize the competencies that we have built through that program. And we believe that through those competencies, we're at a favorable position to say as government, we can really competitively compete globally when it comes to green hydrogen and green ammonia, export of green hydrogen and green ammonia. Thank you. Next slide. So this just gives you a slide of, in terms of the portfolio that we cover as the department, is we cover 4 energy RDI flagship programs, is the energy storage, is the renewable energy hub and spokes flagship program that we're supporting. We're also supporting carbon capture and use, which we also call it called CO2x flagship program, but I'm not going to dwell on that because the essence of today's theme and the message that we're trying to drive today is the hydrogen economy agenda, which is mainly based on the Hydrogen South Africa program that we've been supporting. Next slide, please. This just gives you the competencies that we've built through the HySA program since 2007. We believe that we are at a favorable position to really, when it comes to catalyst and membrane electrode assemblies for fuel cells and electrolyzers, we can play in that space. When it comes to catalyst-coated membranes for hydrogen production, we can play in that space. When it comes to metal hydride-based components and materials that can be incorporated in heavy-duty vehicles and refueling stations, we can play in that space. Is due to the fact of the investments that we've put in as the department, as South African government, into the HySA program, which is it's a hub and spokes type of arrangement that we have, where we have academic institutions, science councils, and businesses coming on board to support the technology development areas that we have believe that have what you can derive opportunities from there. And mainly at the core, it's about advancing technologies that are platinum group metal based type of technologies. Next slide, please. So from the HySA program, this is the portfolio that we have, the IP portfolio that we have across all the critical key thematic areas within the hydrogen value chain. And we are proud to say that we have, with all these patent portfolio that we have through this program, we have managed to have these IPs granted or filed in 14 countries, including South Africa, and 70% of this IP really is linked to commercial products. So next slide, please. And through this IP, we're also proud to say that now we've managed to really validate and test and demonstrate this IP, but at a small scale level, which we believe that now we are as a government, we are at a point where we're advocating for partnerships to come on board to upscale these technologies so that we can then create that commercial pathway for this technology to be integrated in commercial systems. And this just gives you a slide of just a snippet of some of the key demonstrations that we've driven through the HISA program. One that I can highlight is the one just at the peak of COVID. We managed to install 7 fuel cell systems incorporating locally developed IP in the form of membrane electrode assemblies. And those 7 fuel cell systems, they were powering facilities at one military hospital for COVID patients. So, and then the other example that I can give you is the conversion of an electric forklift into a fuel cell powered forklift containing metal hydride components that have been developed from the HISA program in partnership with Impala Platinum Refineries. That forklift is still operational, is at Impala Platinum Refinery since 2015, and we also installed a fuel cell powered refueling station. So those are just examples of real live types of demonstrations that we've supported through this program that now requires upscaling to take them to the next level. Next slide, please. So when we conceptualize the Hydrogen Society roadmap, it's like, based on this experience that we have on the HISA program, how then do we create and make sure that we upscale this technology, create a policy framework that will enable the upscaling of these technologies? That's when we developed the Hydrogen Society roadmap, which was approved by Cabinet in September 2021. And at the core of the Hydrogen Society roadmap is really driving and contributing to the development of sustainable, local sustainable manufacturing capability of South Africa based on these components that we have invested on, as well as the fact that we also want to create that integration and commercialization of these technologies so that then we can be able to address the government key priorities when it comes to job creation, when it comes to reduction of poverty alleviation and inequality and so forth and so forth. So next slide, please. So this just gives you the 6 high-level outcomes of the Hydrogen Society roadmap that informs the high-level vision of the strategy. And it's a very comprehensive strategy in the sense that it gives you, we've identified at least 70 key actions that requires public-private sector partnerships to be involved in to ensure that those implementation of those key actions can then drive the achievement of the vision of the Hydrogen Society roadmap. And also the Hydrogen Society roadmap is cross-cutting as much as the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. We are driving it in terms of the lead department, but it's a collective effort from government, because you can see from these 6 high-level outcomes that it's not only requiring the support from just the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, but the other support from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and DERCO to drive some of the 6 high-level outcomes that we have identified. And I want to mention that at the core, again, in terms of the inclusivity that we want to drive, we're at the core, we're also driving the gender equality and social inclusion as part of the embedded principles that needs to drive what the policy intents that are contained in the Hydrogen Society roadmap. Next slide, please. So the first, I would say the first action that emanated in terms of now, in reflecting on the update, was the approval of the Hydrogen Society, the Green Hydrogen Commercialization Strategy. And by the way, that was one of the key actions that we've identified as part of the Hydrogen Society roadmap, that we need to commercialize the intents, the policy intents that are contained in the Hydrogen Society roadmap. And we required the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition to come up with a commercialization strategy. And rightfully so, the DTIC yielded to that call, and they developed the Green Hydrogen Commercialization Strategy, which really gives effect to the commercial intent of trying to drive those policy intents in the Hydrogen Society roadmap. And the slide just gives you the synergies that confirms that indeed the Green Hydrogen Commercialization Strategy it's a commercial response to what we're trying to drive through the Hydrogen Society roadmap in terms of how we attain a hydrogen economy a society for South Africa. Next slide, please. And the other thing from the department in terms of the structures that we've put in place, when we put in place what we call the DSTI Energy Secretariat at the South African National Energy Development Institute. That is because we understand that in terms of our design as government, there are certain commercial transactions that will not be able to enter into based on the fact that, based on the nature of our design structure. But then we had to put in this energy secretariat structure, which will assist in terms of commercializing some of the intents that we want to push as part of contributing to the to the Hydrogen Society roadmap. So we have this structure that is based in Sanedi, which really assists us as a department as part of the implementing arm of implementing some of the key actions that we need to drive as part of the implementation of the Hydrogen Society roadmap. Next slide, please.
Mandy, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, so just this gives you, due to the fact that we've implemented that, I would say that structure, we have already managed to get in private sector partnerships to come on board, especially the OEMs to support. This is just one example that we have in place, the strategic partnership that we have with Toyota South Africa, where they've come in to support the mobile refueling station, which is currently based in one of our facilities at Northwest University, where it still manages to power their Toyota Marais. Next slide, please. This also our partnership with Mintech in terms of responding to the Hydrogen Society roadmap. We are scaling up our capability in terms of manufacturing catalysts and membrane electrode assemblies for fuel cells. So this is just one example of that scaling up opportunity that we're supporting as the department in partnership with Mintech. Next slide, please. This just also gives you, in terms of the relevance, we're also with district municipalities and local municipalities. We are also rolling out these technologies, fuel cell-based technology and electrolyzers technologies with some of the municipalities. This is an example of the water energy food nexus that we've partnered with the Vembe district municipality in Lompompo, where we're saying that over and above just the hydrogen economy with related technologies, we also address the food needs of the communities in the villages, also as well as addressing the water needs in relation to addressing the energy needs. Next slide, please. We also are supporting, we established what we call the Hydrogen Coordination Office at the CSIR, which gives the credibility to the implementation of the Hydrogen Society roadmap. This is the structure that really is aimed at assisting the government, the key departments that have been identified to drive the Hydrogen Society roadmap, to assist them with any relevant initiatives that needs to be implemented, as well as the fact that this is the structure that assists us in the monitoring, tracking, and evaluation of the strategic integrated projects, which are the SIPs, which at the core we have identified those that are the SIPs are at the core of driving the achievement of the Hydrogen Society roadmap. Next slide, please. This also just gives you, in terms of our response again on the Platinum Valley initiative that we are supporting, which is part of the strategic integrated projects. We've also supporting now what we call the Rainbow Project. The Rainbow Project seeks to give to develop a value proposition or business case for all these large-scale projects that needs to be undertaken as part of developing that hydrogen value corridor for South Africa. So we're saying once we build that business case, we can take it to the development finance institution for a consideration for funding, as well as the fact that we're also supporting one of the carbon capture and use flagship program, which is also one of the identified catalytic projects for the Hydrogen Society roadmap. We've demonstrated the carbon capture and use technology, which we believe it's a game changer to really decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors. So we've supported from the department those demonstration projects at the PPC dual bomb in Limpopo, as well as the Kelvin Power Station in Kempton Park. Next slide, please. And we're also in partnership with UNIDO. We are looking at investigating the feasibility of establishing what we call an international hydrogen energy center, which will act as a special point of accountability for the implementation of the Hydrogen Society roadmap, more like a one-stop shop for the hydrogen for the implementation of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, as well as the fact of through that partnership with UNIDO, we're developing guidelines that will assist in the large-scale implementation of these hydrogen-related projects that we're anticipating. Thank you. Next slide, please. These are just now, okay, then in the following slides, just to give you a clear examples of the policy directives that you have involved in. For example, we are supporting the development of the Eastern Cape Green Hydrogen Strategy. We've provided inputs into the now approved the critical mineral strategy for South Africa. We've really, so this is just one out of many of the policy directives and kind of work that we have been supporting as the department to really drive, because we believe that the achievement of these policy directives will also ultimately contribute to the overall achievement of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap. But I will end here due to time constraints. Once again, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mandy. I know it's a lot for us to discuss and unpack, and hopefully really we will have a very engaging session in our question and answer. Now we move on to our next speaker. Her name is Ms. Victoria Happlethwaite. She is a researcher at the Center for Researching Education and Labor at the University of the Witwatersrand. She holds a Master's of Science in Environmental and Natural Resource Management from the University of Zambia and specializes in entry-level opportunities for young people and vulnerable groups within the renewable energy space and JET. Victoria, thank you.
Thanks, Luanda. Just confirming that you can hear me and see me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm just putting up my slide. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes,
okay, great. So good morning, everyone. And thank you for the invitation to be part of this important discussion. As introduced, my name is Victoria, and I'm a researcher at the Center for Research in Education and Labor at Wits University. So we conduct, I would say, cutting-edge research focused on the complex relationships between education, knowledge, work, the economy, and society, with an aim to promote social and economic and ecological sustainability, and obviously a more just society. So that said, our discussion today on understanding the skills ecosystem for a sustainable green hydrogen value chain brings together two ideas. So my presentation will be bringing together two ideas, that's technology and people. So we often talk about hydrogen as the next frontier in clean energy, but the real question, the one that determines whether this transition succeeds, is do we have the skills, the systems and institutions to make it happen? So my focus today is on that human and institutional layer. So the skills provision in ecosystem that will make South Africa's green hydrogen ambitions possible. And I'll be using insights from different pieces of work we have worked on to speak to this. So there might be someone here asking themselves, why green hydrogen and why now? So you see, and also linked to obviously what Mandy and the previous speaker were also saying, globally, green hydrogen is seen as the missing piece in decarbonizing the hardest to abate sectors. So steel, cement, shipping, and aviation. But for South Africa, it's much more than that. Green hydrogen is an industrial opportunity that connects our renewable energy potential, our PGM endowment, and our manufacturing capabilities. So platinum isn't just part of our mining history, it's central to our hydrogen future. So, sorry, I don't know if someone was saying something or if I should continue.
No, please continue, Vicky.
Okay, so it's in essence the catalyst that enables electrolyzers and fuel cells. That means our mineral base can anchor a new future-facing industrial sector. But I want to emphasize that none of that potential will be realized without a workforce ready to design, install, operate, and maintain this new value chain. So one thing I can confidently say here is that South Africa really does have the building blocks. There's world-class solar and wind resources, which give a cost competitive advantage with regards to producing green hydrogen. We have the PGMs needed for key technologies like electrolyzers and fuel cells, which obviously is a clear comparative advantage. And we have established trade links with potential export markets, Europe, Japan, and Korea. The policy landscape is also moving, as we've seen from the previous speaker's presentation. So from the DTIC's green hydrogen commercialization strategy to the JET IP hydrogen portfolio. But colleagues, we can't ignore the gaps, which is that coordination is weak, institutions are fragmented, and our skills readiness lags behind investment momentum. So the ecosystem needs to evolve, and it needs to evolve fast. So now the challenges you see on your screen are probably not new to many of us, but allow me to briefly touch on them. You see, green hydrogen is a new industry, and we are trying to build it while we are still figuring out what it needs. So it's the classic chicken and egg dilemma. So investment waits for skills and skills waits for investment. What we need is not just more training, but a skills ecosystem, one that connects education, connects labor markets and policy in real time. So if we don't get that right, we risk two outcomes. The first is that investors look elsewhere, or the benefits of hydrogen growth bypass local communities. So I want to remind us here today that a lot of skills and occupational lists have already been identified for the sector by different stakeholders. I can point you in the right direction if we chat later. But the question that remains unanswered is, how do we actualize what we know is needed with regards to the skills component? So just to sort of give you a bit of a context of our skills formation system in South Africa. So the diagram that you see, that Prisha, who is the director at my center, has spent quite a bit of time developing, has fed into different documents across the country. So you see, it illustrates the sheer complexity of South Africa's current skills formation system. So we have many moving parts, right? Various government departments like DHET, DTIC, we have the CETAs, we have TVET colleges, universities, and private providers, all functioning across this system. Then there's the workplace itself, which I would say is the heart of the system. It's where skills are shaped and where demand is defined. But navigating this institutional landscape is a challenge in itself. So what I'm trying to say, colleagues, is that there are many skills supply constraints in the country. And for green hydrogen to succeed, we need to create clear, agile pathways through this system, you see, before you, the system that you're seeing before you, and not add more layers of bureaucracy to it. So the complexity, in essence, must be transformed into coordinated, unified action. And I thought to explain the constraints further, I thought it would be good to have a quick look at a review of courses linked to the just energy transition in the country that we conducted. So it shows that green hydrogen training makes up only about 5% of all the courses currently available. Most of these courses are offered by traditional universities, which account for about 3/4 of the total. Private providers make up a smaller share at 17%, while universities of technology offer the remaining 8%. Importantly, as you see, no green hydrogen courses were found at TVET colleges or community education and training colleges during the review period, highlighting a clear gap in access at these more vocational and community-based levels. Therefore, today I put it to you that a responsive green hydrogen skills ecosystem would balance supply and demand. It would include public sector capacity for regulation and planning and actively promote local participation, especially in regions like, say, the Northern Cape. So that's how we make this an actual just transition. Now, I know that I keep using the phrase skills ecosystem. Let me define what that means, because this is where we need to shift our thinking. So a skills ecosystem is much more than just a training program or a coordinated network. It's the interconnected institutions, the labor markets, and learning pathways that support skills formation and utilization. So it focuses on how skills are produced, matched to demand, and evolve over time within a broader socio-economic context, rather than simply being a coordinated network. So why is this holistic view non-negotiable, you might ask yourself? So it's because without a responsive and inclusive skills system, hydrogen investments face a severe risk. They will either be delayed or they will exclude local communities. So to succeed, an effective green hydrogen skills ecosystem must achieve three things. Firstly, it must balance supply and demand through strong industry and education partnerships. Secondly, it needs to integrate public sector capacity. So this is vital for policy, regulation, and environmental compliance, especially around hydrogen safety. And thirdly, which I would say crucially, is that it must promote local participation to prevent unequal development. So, which is the heart of the transition, as I mentioned earlier. So we need to move beyond simple training and build a truly adaptive system that can grow as fast as the market requires. So then, what does a functional ecosystem look like? I would say it's agile, it's inclusive, and it's collaborative. So look, we don't need thousands of new occupations. We've seen this from other countries. Rather, we need to reskill and upskill the ones that we have. So the welder, the chemical technicians, the safety officers can all transition with targeted hydrogen training.
5 minutes left, Vicky.
Sure. That means that, first of all, skills development should be deliberately integrated into South Africa's national hydrogen strategies and plans, rather than treated as an afterthought. Secondly, creating real partnerships between government, industry, and training providers, expanding hands-on training, localizing training in key corridor regions, and designing for inclusion. You know, youth, women, and small enterprises must be part of this growth story. And countries like Australia and Chile are already doing this. And I think South Africa can too if we start now. So, as indicated, we're not starting from a blank page. Countries across the globe are already moving from strategy to execution, and their lessons are invaluable for us. So they show how government, industry, and education must co-design the solution. So for example, Australia, they've established a hydrogen workforce roadmap that successfully connects their vocational training providers directly with industry hubs. So this is a crucial defense mechanism to ensure skills supply always aligns with sector growth. On the other hand, when you look at the UK as an example, it gives the perfect blueprint for a just transition. So they're actively reskilling their experienced oil and gas workers for hydrogen through accredited programs. So the powerful lesson for South Africa from this is that simply having the mineral wealth and solar potential is not enough. The winning strategy requires deliberate institutional coordination, targeted training investment in regional hubs, and prioritizing a just transition for existing PGM and energy sector workers. So I think I can confidently say that we are at the precipice of a just hydrogen transition. The key takeaway, I would say, is this, that the technical feasibility of green hydrogen is proven. The real bottleneck is skills readiness. Success depends on developing the right workforce. So I think it's time for South Africa to move from strategy to action by adopting a skills ecosystem approach. And that would guarantee, I would say, three powerful outcomes. So the first is local and inclusive job creation. The second is industrialization that is perfectly aligned with our decarbonization goals. And thirdly, our PGM sector remains a cornerstone of the emerging energy economy, thereby securing its future. So the graphic you'll see on the screen illustrates the enormous potential for job creation arising from green hydrogen, as captured in the JET implementation plan. So jobs can be created across core sectors such as mining, agriculture, beneficiation, and renewable energy, as well as support sectors like transport, manufacturing, and construction, and not forgetting the opportunities for SMMEs. So in closing, I just want to reiterate that our resources are vast, our intent, I feel, is clear, and the potential demand is growing. So I think the missing link is a skilled, ready, and inclusive workforce. And addressing this will determine the pace and inclusivity of South Africa's green hydrogen transition. Thank you so much.
Sorry. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Dr. Zalk. We had Dr. Iraj before you, unfortunately. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank
I
you
just
so
couldn't,
much.
unfortunately, I couldn't join earlier.
Yes.
I'm operating on the basis of a manufacturing principle called just in time. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
You're on mute, Lulu.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Our next speaker is Dr. Iraj. He is the Executive Director of the Pan-African Investment and Research Services, with over 4 decades of academic and corporate experience, including Standard Bank. As former group chief economist, he is widely recognized for his expertise in macroeconomic strategy, governance, and sustainable development. Dr. Iraj today will be helping us unpack commodity exchanges in relation to mineral beneficiation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greetings to all present. It's a pleasure and honor to make this presentation for you. I'm going to share my slides and just confirm that it's visible for you. The commodity exchange, let me make sure that we understand what it is and what it is not. commodity exchange is a market institution which manages or facilitates the market participants on the demand on the supply side and provides exchange of information, enables or facilitates transactions, agreements, both the spot and the future trade. This is an important attributes which often is not properly understood. And of course, technically, from an economic point of view, as well as from global trading point of view, it's an exchange that provides and accelerates the process of price discovery. In the old days, price discovery would have taken days, months, and sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. Nowadays, with the help of technology, it is possible that the process of price discovery can be reduced to minutes, if not less, as technology becomes more and more efficient and rapid, fast. What an exchange is not a marketing board. South African miners and politicians and commentators and media people are so still 30 years later remembering the apartheid marketing boards that every time that you talk about or I engage them, I have been in this game for now almost 10 years. And you talk to the CEO of a mining company, a global mining company, listed company. The minute that you talk about the commodity exchange, they talk about, oh, government wants to establish a marketing board. It's unbelievable the level of ignorance and trauma of the past. Essentially, commodity exchange is a fintech solution in today's language. It's a digital platform governed independently by clear rules and regulations to which all the market participants have access and with which they engage and transact on that basis. And it's a very, very significant, efficient, and in many ways, liberalizing platform. We have captured all of it, and Mr. Shinize mentioned at his opening remarks that back in 2019, we concluded a 2.5-year research, empirical research, as well as theoretical research, published in 2020 under the South African PGM exchange. And somehow ironically, and I'll emphasize why ironic at the end of my presentation, the government financed this or co-financed this. And yet here we are 5 years, 6 years later, we're still talking whether we should or shouldn't have it. Now, importantly and critically, commodity exchange is the most beneficial and the most valuable and most strategic end of a beneficiation value chain. It is because in this particular sector, as mentioned, and is commonly known, South Africa possesses 80% of the underground reserves. It's important in this regard to note that every day, every week, and every year that passes by, South Africa's strategic positioning diminishes because more and more secondary markets increase their share of the global supply. And this is because recycling and rebeneficiation of existing PGMs in different manufactured items around the globe has generated a growing secondary market. If necessary, we can come back to that. But even with that, the fact is South Africa does have a dominant global position for now and for the next 80 to 90, possibly 100 years. Therefore, beneficiation in this particular industry has to be strategic and long-term oriented. It is not a 5-year or a 10-year or a short-term beneficiation. It is the positioning of the country to have benefits for the next 100 years or so. If you want an example of it, look at the gold exchange in London. London was exchange was established over 100 years ago, and even today, it's difficult to dislocate it. It stays put, and it will remain put, and it will generate benefits for the UK, despite the fact that UK has not had and does not have an ounce of gold or gold mining. So we published this back in 2020. The report has been available, is available for inspection, for critical examination, and for refinement. And it is somewhat disappointing that South Africa as a whole, government in particular, has not engaged with the findings. The only institution that has shown keen interest and remains interested is the South African Reserve Bank, and that's a very important player. But government has neglected this, despite the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, it finances initial research in 2017 to 2019, and it's almost a national tragedy. However, establishing a commodity exchange is a strategic industrial policy. We so often talk about industrial policy, reindustrializing, beneficiating, all these good, as the previous Minister of Trade and Industry used to say, oh, these are all aspirational. Read to it, we don't really mean it, we just aspire to it. We've got to stop this aspirational statement making and discussion. Industrial policy is about action, not about aspiration. It's about setting targets that are achievable, embedded in the national endowment, and feasible in terms of the complementary skills and other institutional requirements. I would argue strongly, and I have been doing it for more than 8 years, that the establishment of a PGM is well based or founded within the national endowment of the country. We have all that it takes. The only missing element is a sleeping government and a non-patriotic industry. Those two are the only two missing elements of a successful PGM exchange in the country. And the tragedy is that if we don't wake those two players in and bring them in, South Africa will lose this opportunity, and it will have only itself to blame. We cannot blame any other missing element, not even the skills, not even the institutional requirements. So establishing an exchange is part and has to be integral to our industrial policy. Successive ministries and Department of DTI and all the industrial policies have neglected this and have paid zero attention to it, even as we speak. So what it will do, a PGM exchange, if established along the line that is suggested in the report that I mentioned, it will link key service sectors to the most beneficial sector, which is the financial and legal sector, insurance, warehousing, logistics. And of course, to the extent that it is a digital platform, it's an important node along the value chain, given the existing technologies and the growing digitalization around the globe. And the process of price discovery will also provide South Africa with a 100-year or longer platform to develop all the interrelated beneficial value chain in this industry. We need to reimagine in this context, reimagine beneficiation. Historically, the core beneficiation, that orange piece in this wheel, has been energy, water, transport, logistics, construction, or an R&D, which has been the concept of, when we talk about beneficiation, we keep saying, well, we don't want to dig and export, or we want to manufacture it, but add value to it before we export. Yes, that's been absolutely true and remains true. But that is not always possible. And in some cases in South Africa has been made impossible, most importantly because of the fiascos that we have for 10, 15 years in our energy sector, where smelters had to close down, where we had to go back to digging ore and exporting it because we couldn't refine them. And I think that has been the definition, the concept of, or the framework for beneficiation. It's very central, it has to be, but we need to move that boundary. We need to extend the value chain of beneficiation beyond refining and fabricating to the financial aspects of it. And that brings us to the commodity exchange, which then links up, unlocks, generates resources, generates tax, creates a whole lot of high-paid value chain jobs and institutions, all of which have fiscal benefits as well as creates opportunities for human resource development, which leads ultimately to social development. So my contention is that we need to redefine our national industrialization strategy to include commodity exchanges. It is true that at the moment, and the report is primarily about PGM exchanges, but quite frankly, the same, we can talk about manganese, we can talk about some other commodities of which we have our fair share of global, if not a dominant share of the minerals. I don't have time to go through the details. I'm just touching on the key points, and then if need be, we can come back, or you can refer to the reports where we have also highlighted that. Two important additional features of PGM, it records, tracks, and stores all information exchange because it's all digitalized. It's like your bank statement, if you like. And the technology these days, with the help of blockchain technology, has become a fairly routine application. So we are not talking about inventing anything. We are not talking about promoting anything. We are talking about applying what everybody else is using it in other sectors and in the stock exchanges around the globe. It also gathers, aggregates other information from other markets and exchanges, and that reinforces the position that such an exchange would have in South Africa. Of course, critical for the success is good governance and effective regulation. And this is the role that the government has to play. National Treasury, mining and an energy department, and to some extent trade and industry. But most importantly, the National Treasury would need to coordinate. And of course, the cabinet would have to stand behind it. Here, the issues of good governance and comprehensive and appropriate regulation becomes critical. Interestingly enough, the establishment of a PGM exchange doesn't need fiscal input from the government. So whether the government is floating in cash or bankrupt is irrelevant. We are not asking for fiscal investment. We are talking about proper regulation of the framework within which such an exchange would gain credibility and establish its credibility for the next century or so. So that's an important observation. Regulatory alignment would have to be with common standards and legal principles globally. We cannot do our own.
Left, Dr. Iraj.
Sorry.
Thank you. 5 minutes left. Thank you.
Now I'll finish that. Exchanges has its own governance regime. These are again, exchanges are globally been with us for more than 100 years. We are not reinventing the wheel. Important in this day and age is the question of private information and cybersecurity. Again, a very well-known these days item. I don't want to spend time on it. And of course, at the end, it's the effectiveness of regulation and the seamless interplay of these various sectors that matters. Safeguarding the value, this is my final slide. PGM reserve is a national imperative for South Africa. This requires a market-friendly beneficiation with maximization of beneficiation strategy. PGM exchange becomes central and a feasible one. And the JSE has the existing technology. So we don't even have to invest in that. We have to apply and extend that. The success of it requires a policy framework, as I mentioned, across government, a SARB, and the JSE. We have been importantly in discussion with all of them. So we are not dictating or promoting, we have been participatory in the process of producing the report that we mentioned. And the timing, in my view, and these are some political economy consideration, couldn't be more favorable. South Africa is in a doldrum as far as growth is concerned, as far as the mood of investment and attractiveness is concerned. And I contend that the establishment of a PGM along the line that's suggested would boost the country's global profile, would in a positive way. It would boost JSE's ranking, and it would establish a platform for the next decade and for the next century or so. The book is there for all the preparatory work that had to be done, and the final chapters of it offers action plan for implementation. I mentioned, and this I repeated, fiscal funding is not required. It is the coordination and credibility of policy framework that is required by the government. And of course, the fact that Europe, United States, and recently Chinese are pushing hard to establish a PGM exchange, and I don't blame them. It's good for them if they can do what London or UK did 100 years ago. For the next century, they will benefit from it. Therefore, in this context, time is of essence, and the South African government needs to wake up to this reality. And we as a nation, as citizens, we have a responsibility to promote that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Iraj. Some sobering thoughts there at the end for us to really ponder and engage on. I'd like to now welcome our last speaker, Dr. Nimrod Zalk, who is the Chief Research Officer for Climate and Development at the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance at UCT, specializing in green industrialization and development finance in Africa. He previously served as the Deputy Director General at South Africa's Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and holds an MSc degree and PhD in economics from South University of London. He will be taking us through critical minerals utilization to advance economic and industrial change. Thank you, Dr. Zalk.
Thank you very much, Lwanda, and thanks to Mistra for the invite. I don't have a presentation, so I'd just like to run through some notes that I've made on the question of how we might be able to utilize critical minerals to advance economic and industrial change. And this is based on work that we've done and been doing at the school on critical minerals, not just with respect to South Africa, but also the continent more broadly. What I would argue is that we need, I would call, quite a pragmatic assessment of the opportunities that are associated with critical minerals in general across the continent, and in particular in relation to PGMs in the South African economy. So you often come across a figure that is cited that says that Africa has approximately 30% of the share of proven critical mineral reserves, and that this is understandably implies an enormous opportunity for the continent. What I would argue is that we need somewhat of a more disaggregated understanding of the distribution of this opportunity, broken down by mineral, by country, and also with a deep understanding of the value chains into which these critical minerals feed, because I would argue that critical minerals are indeed a potential advantage. Whether they can be transformed into an actual advantage really depends on the extent to which African countries, South Africa included, can master the technologies that are necessary to enter the various value chains. And in the case of PGMs, the implications run right from mining right through to the end stage of manufacturing. So of this 30% of critical minerals that is cited as this broad African endowment, we know that a significant chunk of these are platinum group metals, of which South Africa has, by my figures, about 90% of the world's proven deposits. Ira just said 80%. Either way, it's an enormously overwhelming share. And we also have other deposits of other critical minerals, including manganese, vanadium, and so forth. In South Africa's case, the future of the platinum group metal mining sector is very heavily bound up with the pace and the scale that the hydrogen economy emerges at. So industrial demand for platinum group metals is set to fall due to declining demand, in particular for catalytic converters that are used in internal combustion engines to limit emissions, and as there is a global shift towards electric vehicles. Now, obviously, nobody knows the precise pace that shift will happen at, but it does seem that there's a pretty inexorable shift to electric vehicles. So there are a number of hydrogen-related technologies that are anticipated and perhaps in some cases hoped that will generate significant alternative sources of industrial demand for PGMs. And a couple of significant ones are that they are required for the production of fuel cells, both for stationary uses as well as for fuel cell powered vehicles. And also they are needed in electrolyzers that are required to produce green hydrogen. However, the hydrogen economy has been quite slow to get out of the starting blocks. So if one looks, for instance, at fuel cell vehicles, I don't know how accurate this anecdote is, but somebody said to me recently that globally there are more Maseratis on the road than there are vehicles that are powered with fuel cells. Someone can fact check that. The point is really that the fuel cell industry is emerging off a very low base. Green hydrogen, which is another major hope for PGM demand, there's a tremendous amount of research and development, and pilot projects have been established around the world. But as of now, green hydrogen is yet to emerge as a fully commercialized technology. So, for instance, the largest promoters of green hydrogen, the European Union, through their green hydrogen strategy, it's important to note that there was a fairly recent finding by the European or the EU Court of Auditors that the EU strategy lacked adequate evidence to justify the quite bullish outlook that they had on European demand for green hydrogen. We also know that that transporting green hydrogen in gas form is really increasingly recognized as being unviable. However, this does not of itself mean that there is not a case for green hydrogen. And there is an argument that green hydrogen will indeed be required at the top of what's called the hydrogen ladder, where there don't appear to be good decarbonization alternatives based on electrification, such as for the production of energy-intensive products like fertilizers and steel. So there is a case for green hydrogen, perhaps not as kind of overarching as is sometimes projected. So what does this all mean for South Africa's platinum group metal mining sector and the hydrogen economy? the pace of the emergence of the hydrogen economy will be a major determinant of the long-term prospects of the PGM sector. And this is in the context where PGMs have become the largest mining sector in the South African economy, both in terms of value and in terms of employment. To me, this would imply that PGM miners really need to be putting a lot of resources, and probably a lot more resources, into the research and development that's needed to develop new industrial uses for PGMs, which also needs to be supported by public research and development, which in turn needs a strong focus on ensuring that significant chunks of those industrialization opportunities actually take place in South Africa. More generally, as part, in terms of the role of PGMs and green hydrogen in South Africa's green transition, and what hopefully is a just green transition, is what I would argue a more balanced approach is needed to be taken with respect to the resources that are put into the green hydrogen economy work. And that, by that, I don't just mean financial resources, but also critically the time and attention that government officials spend on green hydrogen related activities relative to other green economy opportunities. And those opportunities should not be overlooked, under-resourced, or receive inadequate attention, because a number of them have a much better short to medium-term fit with South Africa's developmental needs. So in particular, and partly through competitiveness gains that are to be derived from improvements in energy and resource efficiency, there are a range of relatively low carbon sectors of the economy that have been creating jobs and can very significantly expand their levels of employment. And this includes in areas like high-value agriculture, like agro-processing and machinery and equipment. In addition, we need to be pursuing other more, let's say, conventionally associated activities, or conventionally activities that are conventionally associated with the green economy, although recognizing that they are at this stage quite niche in the South African economy, and they are indeed emerging, but off a very low base. So this includes areas like adding value to other critical minerals like manganese, where possible, where feasible, production of renewable energy componentry, assembly of, in particular, stationary battery storage applications, and of course the shift to electric vehicles, which includes not just four-wheelers, but also potentially three- and two-wheelers. So I hope that provides at least from our perspective, a measured kind of input in relation to PGMs and the emerging hydrogen economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zalk. I think we've had an impressive range of speakers that are really lifting us to engage in this discussion. And really, it's a contestation of field, right? Where one comes up with this one, and it's our prerogative to then engage and say, this is what we feel at this level and at a national level. I now open up the space to the question and answer. People can raise their hands. We already have 2 questions in the Q&A. We can start with that while people ready themselves to come up and ask questions. Please, let's engage. I think I'll start with the Q&A now. We have Michael Khan, and he's, I think, directing this question to you, Mandy. And he says, great work. How many licenses has Hydrogen South Africa granted to other companies to commercialize and exploit the US and Netherlands patent awards? Mandy? Is Mandy online? Another question that was phrased, how many good solar installations and wind profiles? We have many good solar installations and wind profiles, but does not translate into low cost inputs for processing green hydrogen. The Eskom monopoly continues to force excessive costs of energy inputs, thus constraining beneficiation. Your thoughts to the panel. I opened this one to the panel. Colleagues from the panel, anybody would like to take this one?
Yeah, may I?
Thank you, Iraj.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Our policies are conflated here. As yet, on the one hand, we want to have green energy, and on the other hand, we want to rescue Eskom without doing what Eskom needs to do to rescue itself, meaning managing itself more efficiently instead of taxing competing industries. So I think I fully agree that this whole area of energy and the discourse around the so-called just transition has got a lot of confusion in it. Even municipalities now are trying to tax the citizens or the business with the natural residents or juristic companies, tax them because they go put their solar panels on. Why? Because they don't want to lose the revenue on energy or electricity that historically they have put their whole business plan on. So yeah, this issue is very important. We need to remove contradictions. We need to look at the true cause and the true factors that lead us to success, not to run the shop as we need cash, so we'll tax somebody to put the money in and do what we have been doing historically. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iraj, for that input. And now I'd like to open the questions and answers to the floor. Do we have any questions online? Team, are we seeing any questions coming up? And maybe I'll come back to you, Dr. Zalk, when you mentioned that we need a balanced approach while we pursue green hydrogen, we look at other alternative avenues as well. Can you just give us one or two, what would those ideal alternatives be as we measure these two options?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned a few sectors, but I can elaborate a little bit. So one recent piece of work that I've been involved with looks at the relative carbon intensity of sectors in the South African economy compared to their labor intensity. And when one looks at that, you can see quite a split almost across manufacturing. So we obviously have some heavy industries that are very carbon intensive. And for the most part, they, over the last decade, have actually been losing jobs, partly because of the electricity situation that Iraj has referred to. But there's quite an interesting kind of correlation between sectors that are more labor intensive, and some of which have lost jobs, but there are also a significant group of sectors which have gained employment over the last decade. And I think that it's important to recognize that there are a set of sectors which are relatively low carbon. B, their carbon intensity is very much a function of the carbon intensity of our electricity system, i.e. coal-based energy from Eskom. And C, that they have been expanding jobs. And I would argue that that in a way is the kind of sweet spot, if you like, where industrial policy and decarbonization objectives mutually reinforce each other, and we should have a very heavy focus on. So I'm certainly not making the case that we shouldn't pursue green hydrogen as an opportunity. The argument that I'm making is that we need to make sure that there is an allocation of financial and human resources that is commensurate with where the opportunities lie, particularly for raising employment in sectors that also have many of the positive characteristics of industrialization. And the ones that I mentioned are I mentioned high value agriculture, or horticulture, which has actually been growing jobs in some areas quite dramatically, like the citrus industry between, I think, 2014 and 2024 actually doubled its employment rate. I mean, this is in an economy that where we've struggled to get employment growth of 1%. Food, beverages, these are all, and similar sectors have also been expanding jobs. Machinery and equipment, which is actually collectively quite large when you include electrical machinery and parts of electronics. And again, the case is, we need a lot more effort and resourcing in those areas that have a much more proximate connection to the development problems that we are urgently trying to solve.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Zalk. And now we have a hand raised from Martin Kramer. Martin, can you come in, please? Martin? Okay, we'll move on to... Oh, thank you. Thank you, Martin. Come in, please.
Yeah, my question is, how competitive are platinum-based electrolyzers when compared with non-platinum-based alkaline and solid oxide electrolyzers? I have a fear that perhaps it'll be solid oxide that could be chosen in the Eastern Cape, which would be quite a blow for platinum group metals and South Africa.
Thank you so much, Martin. Can one of our presenters respond to that, please?
Luanda, I can come in there.
Yeah.
It was literally a slide that I ended that I couldn't get through. If you just give me a second, and let me know if you can see my slide here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this is basically one of, when it comes to technology, it's constantly advancing and it's really something we cannot predict. And really, I think depending on which sort of electrolyzer, it becomes more cheaper at that point, or prominent at that point. It also impacts on which material or which mineral is critical at at a certain point, because as someone once told me, what's critical for me might not be critical for you, and what's critical now might not be critical tomorrow. And I think that's the case for technology and as it advances. So currently your PEM electrolyzers is at your market uptake alongside your alkaline, with the SOEC slowly entering the market, and still, like you said, potential that it could take over, but it's something we honestly cannot predict. Because from the study that we found, is just how technologies are, and with I mean, and I think the point of technologies is, as we improve technologies, we want it to be cheaper and more efficient. So this basically just gives you a sort of a visual of where the different technologies are in case sorry, my screen just froze here. Yeah, in case of the market, from a market perspective. So yeah, your platinum based PEM electrolyzers, are still not yet the cheapest option, but they regarded as sort of very versatile and future ready for renewable hydrogen systems. And as energy costs, or as costs decline and manufacturing scales up, PEM technology will increasingly rival and eventually complement, your non-platinum alkaline and SOE systems. But still, it's very it's still a sort of a gray zone. I think from a technology perspective, from the study we did, we can't really predict which technology would sort of be the most prominent in the future, and that then, like you mentioned, would pose a risk to the platinum group metal sector. Thanks.
Just to come in briefly on this issue, to make the point, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, that when we talk about cost of a particular technology, we need to take into account the whole life cycle. It might as well be that alkaline electrolysis technology is cheaper upfront, and the PEM ones are more expensive. But in terms of, I think, the purity of the material, the efficiency, and application in the long term, in terms of maintenance and so on, you might find that the platinum-based ones emerge much cheaper compared to the alkaline ones. I suppose going forward, research is still being undertaken. There's also the possibility of reducing the loading of the PGM in the electrolyzers. So I think in the overall, the PEM ones still prove themselves as better ones long term. Thanks.
Thank you, Edie. And our next hand is Teresa. Teresa, please come in. Teresa? Colleagues, do we have more questions? Sorry, I can't see the hands raised on my side.
Hello, hi, it's Teresa.
Hi, Teresa, thank you.
Hi, yes, thanks for unmuting me. I just wanted to find out, like under reforms, like for incentives and the regulatory framework, what can be introduced as like targeted fiscal incentives.
Thank you so much. Can one of our panelists take that up, please? Iraj, maybe you?
Yes, but I would like to understand the question better. Targeted fiscal incentive for what? Is that for training? Is that for industrialization? I think I'm not clear on the question, but maybe Nimrod, as he's raised his hand, maybe better fit to answer the question.
Dr. Zalk?
Yeah, hi. I mean, I think I can only give a partial response. I mean, I'm no longer in government and haven't been for the last couple of years. I certainly don't speak for anybody, but just to point out that in the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, there is a proposal that a section of the Income Tax Act, off the top of my head, I think it's section 12I, which has historically supported large projects, becomes reactivated, but that the criteria be changed to really encourage catalytic projects in the green economy. And in a way that would then really, it wouldn't be about trying to guess what those technologies are necessarily. It would be really based on a criteria that would encourage firms that believe that they have a kind of winning technology to kind of come forward and apply for the incentive. And that, I mean, for instance, and that could be in a number of areas. It could be to make electrolyzers. It could be battery projects. It could be in other parts of the green value chain. And there are other advantages, I would argue, towards using tax incentives in that way. If they're smart, if they're smartly, the criteria are smartly established, then you have this kind of self-selection. So companies that know that they're not going to be particularly competitive in that space, it's not worth them applying for the tax incentive. So yeah, that's perhaps at best a partial answer to the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zalk. And I think the last hand we have, and apologies for the pronunciation, is Soha Santos. Can you please unmute yourself? Thank you. Soha Santos. Okay, I think we might have lost the last hand that we had for this session. Thank you so much to all our panelists for engaging us today on this very important topic of green hydrogen and the greening economy. I would now like to hand over to Zama, the senior researcher for the CASA faculty. Zama?
Thank you, Londa. Thank you for handling that. So just some closing remarks. I think we see that South Africa stands at a decisive point where economic renewal, global energy transitions, and responsible resource stewardship come together. The emerging green hydrogen economy presents a transformative opportunity to decarbonize heavy industry, transport, and also to reposition the country as a strategic global exporter of clean energy solutions. And at the same time, South Africa's abundant critical minerals, which include PGMs, manganese, vanadium, are foundational to the modern energy ecosystem. These minerals underpin technologies such as fuel cells, electrolyzers, advanced batteries. So we need the critical mineral strategy essentially to assist us to move beyond exporting unprocessed ores to building value-adding industries and deepening manufacturing capabilities. But to realize these opportunities demands policy certainty, accelerated infrastructure development, stronger public-private collaboration, and a commitment to environmental and social integrity. Skills development and inclusive participation must form the backbone of the transition to avoid creating new inequities. So essentially, the green hydrogen economy, our critical mineral strategy should be viewed as working together, complementary pillars of South Africa's industrial future. And now I'd just like to thank all our speakers for making the time to be with us and sharing your insights and sharing the work that you're busy with. It was very insightful, interesting, and I think we are left with a lot to think about and hopefully take forward in our little corners where we are. I'd like to also thank all the participants for joining and contributing to the discussion. Thank you to all the MISTRA colleagues that have put this together and our communications team. And yeah, just thank you everyone for making this a successful webinar. And this is now the official close of the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us.